In tradition, people are cremated. Women, although she is still alive, will be asked to sit on the pyre and she will be burned alive with her husband's body. And this was a very, very sort of evil practice which went on at a very big scale at that time. So women was not allowed to survive or live after her husband had died. So she was sort of made to sit. That's a picture of a funeral and a lady sitting on that. So Guru Amar Das abolished this practice completely and said that anybody who is following Sikh faith should not only stop this practice within their own community but also go out and preach against this evil tradition. And the words that Guru at that time, when women were considered untouchables, I think it was at that time, these are the words of Guru Nanak itself: from woman man is born, without woman man is, within woman man is conceived, to woman he is engaged and married. Woman becomes his friend, through woman the future generations come. When his woman dies, he seeks another woman, to woman he is born. From woman is born, without woman there would be no one at all. And there is this goes on, and the last two lines which I couldn't fit in here, but the last very one here is, so why call her bad, from her kings are born. So these were the words of Guru Nanak in those sort of times. The fourth Guru, Guru Ram Das, he, as sort of the foundations had been laid by the first three Gurus, and he sort of formalized the institution itself. And the Golden Temple, which is probably one of the most famous sort of places of worship, which a lot of people visit from different countries, was built by Guru Ram Das, the fourth Guru, in Amritsar. And the beauty about this place, it's not just the gold on it, but the Golden Temple has 4 doors. And the 4 doors were kept for that you come from any direction, from any caste, from any religion, that you can enter this place. And the level of Golden Temple itself is at a slightly lower level as compared to the rest of the city. So you have to sort of go down, walking down the stairs. And the concept again there is, if you are coming here to meet me, leave all your ego and everything else outside, come with humility. And just opposite the Golden Temple is Akal Takht, which was built then by the 6th Guru, who also brought in the concept of, from the spiritual aspect, also the political and the religion, bringing them together, making the Sikhs into a saint and a soldier at the same time. And that has a high raised level of the platform of the building. And the architecture, we are talking about roughly around 1574. The architecture of these two buildings is such that, as I said, this place is at a lower level, that is at a higher level. And it's a practical truth that when you're sitting within the Golden Temple, you cannot see the other building. But when you're sitting on the other side, which is considered as a political, you can say, establishment for Sikhs, where all the decisions related to the community or the nation are taken, you can directly see into the Golden Temple. The concept there being that when you are thinking or meditating, you should not bring in politics or anything. You should be just sitting there, forgetting about everything else. But on the other hand, when you are leading the community, when you're taking decisions for the good of the community, you should always keep in mind what's in there, what has been taught. So that's how the whole thing was built. The 5th Guru, Guru Arjan, he gave us Guru Granth Sahib in its form, and that's the handwritten Guru Granth Sahib. Again, as I said, we don't call it a book because it's considered the living word of God. And Guru Arjan Dev worked for a large number of years collecting all the hymns from the previous Gurus and formally compiling it and editing it in one place. Guru Arjan himself was martyred by the Mughal emperor of that time. He had to go through a lot of sort of hardships just because the followers of Islam, who were sort of people who were guiding the king at the time, considered him to be a challenge to their authority. So he was made to sit on a hot iron plate in times when the temperature was roughly around 45 to for 50 degrees Celsius, and then hot sand was poured over his head. And these are the sort of tortures that were given to him. But he kept sitting there and keep saying that, Tera kiya meetha lage, means God, all you do to me, it's your wish, your will, and I feel that this is a sweet thing to me. These are the pictures of Guru Arjan, and the actual translation of the verse, as I said, your action seems so sweet to me, Nanak begs for the treasure of the Naam, the name of Lord. So while he was sitting on this hot iron plate going through these tortures, these were his last words in human form that he uttered. From here on, then his son, who then next became the Guru, the sixth Guru, he said that Sikhs have now shown the peaceful side, but at the same time you need to have the self-defense as well. And he introduced the concept of Miri and Piri, and he wore two swords, one this way, crossed two swords, one called Miri and other called Piri, one for the spiritual side and other for the social justice. And this is where he said that Sikh has to be a saint and a soldier at the same time. The seventh Guru, he was quite I haven't been able to find a lot in terms of his writing, but in terms of historical perspective, he was a great environmentalist. At the age of 13 or 14, he was walking in the garden, and the robe that he was wearing, a flower got stuck in it and it fell. And he closed the doors, he went in and he closed the doors and didn't come out for a few days. He was so much taken aback by that just small incident of a flower breaking. He said that because if we consider that this is the creation of God, we need to take care of it. So, and he himself had a dispensary, and he himself used to look after all the sort of sick animals that were, or stray animals that people used to leave, and he created a big sort of place for looking after those animals as well. This is the eighth Guru, who became Guru at the age of 5, and by the age of 8 he passed on the Guruship to the ninth Guru, because at the age of 8 he was in New Delhi. At that time there was a big epidemic of cholera, and a lot of people were dying with that, and people came to him and asked for that, how we can be saved. He said that somebody needs to, probably will give up his life, and he served a lot of sick and poor people around that time. In the end, the whole thing kept increasing and a lot of people were dying. So a small pond was made, and Guru just touched his toe, the water in that pond, and said, whoever drinks this will probably survive. And he took the whole thing on himself, and Guru's body was infected with the cholera virus or bacteria, whatever it was after that. But this place still exists in India, New Delhi, and people with faith have gone there and have come back cured. Even nowadays, I have seen a lot of people going through this. In fact, within my own family, depending on how you see it from the faith side, maybe not from a scientific or other view, but my grandmother, her hand got pierced. She used to be sort of a lot into art and craft, and her eyesight was very weak, but she was building a candle and trying to put in the thread into it, and she had this sort of big needle, and the whole thing pierced through her hand, came out from the other side, and she didn't go to any doctors, and she used to always keep a bottle full of water, this holy water, all the time. So if somebody would get sick in the family or anything, she would just say that this is the only medicine you need. And I saw literally flying that every day for a few days, and the whole thing healed on its own. Generally, if somebody gets something like that and you go to the doctor, that's probably putting water on it will be the last thing you will expect somebody to do. But as I said, that again, it's your faith, how you associate. And this is just a very, very small example, but there are a lot of other people who have been cured in that place. The ninth Guru, then he traveled a lot around, not only in India but other countries as well at that time. Again, ninth Guru was massacred by the emperor of that time, Aurangzeb, and his 3 disciples were massacred as well. The one picture I've shown here was sawn into 2 pieces by putting in wooden planks. Other one was boiled alive, and the third one was put on fire. in front of all the whole crowd. And then the Guru was beheaded. And before the beheading, the emperor said that if you are God yourself, why not show us some miracle? And the Guru refused to show any miracle. He said that for a person of humility to live in his will is the biggest miracle. And then they beheaded him. And then the last Guru in the human form, Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru. And Guru Gobind Singh had to fight a lot of battles. So at this time there was said that there was not just the spiritual aspect only, there was a traditional Guru was keeping an army directly challenging the oppressors, people who were trying to make it difficult for poor and downtrodden people to live. So he ended up having fighting a lot of battles. And in the end, his whole family, because Guru Tegh Bahadur, the 9th Guru, was his father, so he was a martyr. Guru Gobind Singh's 4 sons, and starting from the age of 16, 13, 11 and 7, all four were martyred. 2 of them were bricked alive, and 2 of them died fighting in the battlefield. And his mother also was killed by the ruler of that place. So he sort of gave up all his family, but he still kept the tradition alive. And when Guru Gobind Singh said that this is now my time to complete my life in this world and go, he from there on said that the holy Guru Granth Sahib will be the Guru from here on. There won't be any concept of any human gurus. So he ordained the Khalsa, or the Sikh Brotherhood, as we generally give it the name. Probably that's not the correct translation. What he did here was he prepared a bowl of nectar, and he stirred it with double-edged sword, putting sweets in it, and he baptized 5 Sikhs who were called Panch Pyaras, or 5 beloved. And from there on, the concept of how you become initiated into the faith is in the hands of the 5 beloved. So now also, if somebody wants to get ordained into the Sikh faith, you have to go to the Gurdwara if the ceremony is taking place. And 5 people who are selected within the community, who are considered to be of sort of very pure soul, very spiritual, meditating and living a very good life, will come together and do this ceremony. At this time, as I said, that some of these things had already came into existence before that, but Guru Gobind Singh sort of formalized the institution and gave us a sort of code of conduct. And the first part was the identity of a Sikh. And as you can see in this, there are 5 articles of faith. First of all is uncut hair, not only on the head, from head to the toe. You're not supposed to shave, cut. Color, it's not just about cutting them, dye, or do anything with your hair. So that's the first thing. And then, so that picture probably is not very visible. That's just trying to show the hair, called Ks. And all of these have their name in Punjabi language, starting with a K. So they are called 5 Ks. So Kesh is the uncut hair, covered with a turban, or keski as we call it. Even while sleeping, I will not keep my hair uncovered. I am wearing a bigger turban now, but when I am at home, I will take this one off, and there is a smaller one underneath, which is a sort of, I would say probably this big piece of cloth. I will always keep my hair covered. And the condition is for both men and women. It's not just that men have to do all these things, it's for both. A lot of people slowly and slowly, like in any other faith, have slowly and slowly started going out of tradition in terms of whether we are required to wear this or not. But so a lot of times you will see that the men are wearing the turban, but women have stopped wearing. Again, I think maybe due to social pressures or other reasons, a lot of women have, but there are still a lot who still continue to wear the turban. And again, the reason being that when Guru gave us this concept of Sikhism, and the reason why we said that everybody is equal, so man and woman both are equal, so the code was also given both to man and woman at the same time. So that's the first one. Second one is the kara. So an iron bangle that I'm wearing in my hand. And this is to remind me all the time that I am a Sikh of the Guru, and anything that I do with my hands should be good deeds, nothing bad with my hands. And it reminds me all the time of the God also, that there is no limit, there is no start or end to the God. The third one is a wooden comb, or it's called kanga as well, and I always keep it in my hair. So after I comb my hair, I will just tuck it. I will tie a knot on the head and then tuck it just under the knot and then tie my turban after that. And it's a wooden comb. Obviously, hygiene is one part, that as a Sikh, you should be not only sort of just growing your hair, you need to keep it clean as well. And it's must for me to comb my hair twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. And the kanga is also a sign of that while you're combing your hair, at the same time you're thinking about pureness or cleanliness, so that all the thoughts should be clean as well. It's not just about cleaning your hair only. Kachera is a special undergarment or drawers that you wear, and it's again a sign of self-discipline and readiness. And the last one then is kirpan, and it's a small kirpan that every Sikh who is initiated into the faith will be wearing. So I will just maybe show you the one that I have here. That's a kirpan. And kirpan at that time used to be 3 feet long, but because of practical reasons I can't carry it on. Especially when you are traveling in the plains, you have to take this one off as well. But it was, again, as it very clearly written, there was for protection and justice. And kirpan itself is made of 2 words, kirpa and an. So it's not just a sword that you hold in your hand, a weapon in your hand, and you go about killing people. It's more about self-restraint at the same time, but also making sure that you are able to protect your own dignity and honor. And also, if you come across somebody like who cannot help themselves, you can do this for them as well. Sikhs, based on their historic sort of tradition, and there are a lot of stories in India that when the Mughal rulers used to sort of kidnap the women from the village, take them away, it's always Sikhs where people would turn up to, and they used to go, even if they had to get their own men killed, will go and bring the women back to their families. This tradition was even alive till very recently. A lot of people used to just believe that, yes, if I'm sitting with a Sikh woman, used to feel very sort of safe that nothing wrong will happen with me. And I don't know if anybody you have been following, there has been a sort of case very recently in India about the rape of a woman in New Delhi in the bus. And this thing came up a lot in media, a lot of discussion going around it as well. And the thing that people, when are meeting and sitting together and talking about, is that just because we have slowly and slowly stopped letting the Sikhs as part of the community, there have been a lot of sort of things going on in terms of the social conflict with the Sikhs and the majority and the minority community in India as well. And that caused a lot of differences. And people now say, a lot of women have started saying that if I was a woman who had a sword with her, I probably won't have to worry about all these sort of bad things happening to me, or if I had somebody like that with me. So that's where the practical, you can say, the use of these things come in. After the 5 articles of faith, there are 4 prohibitions. I don't know if these are the best pictures I could get, but that's what I have. The first one is to dishonor the hair, and probably not the best way to describe it, but this is, as I said, that you're supposed to keep. And this is not about fashion or any other statement, it's more about living in the will of God. If God has given us hair, I believe that it's for some purpose, and I want to live in the will of God that He has given me these years. Second one is to eat kutha or killed animal or meat. Again, the compassion comes into play here. And then the next one is having any intimate relationship outside of marriage. So for a Sikh man and woman, it's for both, that that you can have only relationship with your partner after marriage. And then the last one is any kind of drugs, intoxicants, including alcohol, tobacco, or any sort of drugs that. And if you look at, I think, at least some of them have already been proven scientifically as well to be bad for you. I'm sure the rest of them people will slowly and slowly come to realize that are not good for us. And that's coming to the 1708 when the Guru Granth Sahib, which is our present Guru, was ordained the Guruship by the 10th Guru. And it has 1430 pages, all written in musical notations in ragas. And it's not just that you can read them, you can sing from the first verse to the last one using musical instruments as well. And it's very well structured in terms of notations and which rag that each specific verse should be sung in. It's a very beautiful, if you come across, I will just definitely suggest that if you get a chance, at least once in lifetime, try to read it, even if you can get an English translation. And the writings for Guru Granth Sahib, not only the Gurus, as I said earlier, from 36 different contributors, including saints from other walks of life and religious backgrounds as well. And this is from the 10th Guru, again bringing everybody together into how he sees the humankind, the race, or the creation of the God. And that's where I finish. So I can leave it at this, or I can probably leave it at this if some of you want to read it. And any questions?
Questions, Ben?
No one else does. I have two questions. The first thing is that I've heard that your God doesn't have a gender, so normally you don't choose he or she. Is that right? So if you could talk about that for a moment. And the other thing is, has there ever been like a Sikh national movement, or the religion has always been comfortable with their rulers not being Sikh?
Yeah, for the first one, yes, God has no gender. As he has, God cannot be born into sort of. But the way, if you try to translate the writings of the Gurus, I think the way it's written is, I will just read out one in Punjabi and then do a translation. Is jag mein purakh ek hai, aur sagli nar sabai. Is jag means in this world, Purakh means man. Ek hai means one. There is only one man in the whole universe, which is God himself. Hor sagli nar sapai. So the soul, which is in me and you, irrespective of any gender, we all souls are considered to be, nar means woman, or the female side you can say. So that's one way of looking at it. But again, as such, because God is not born, or God is not going to die. So from a human perspective, there is no gender for the God. But he is considered, not only from this, there is also written about God that God, tu mera pita, tu hai mera mata. Pita means father, mata means mother. That you are my father, you are my mother. So both gender come into play there as well. Tu mera bandhav, tu mera brata. There, you are my brother, you are my sister. So when we look at the relationship with God in that way, there is no gender. But that again then, because God is the omnipresent, so we all are sort of, you can say, a sort of superpower here, and then we all sitting around here as she and he concept also plays some role here.
Is there also like humankind being made in the image of God, or is there any basis for that in Sikhism?
Yeah, it's considered that the human form, Guru Gobind Singh, there is a very interesting story about this. I won't go into the details, but the gist of it was that he said that if you want to get the darshan or you want to see God, when you get up in the morning, you dress up, tie your turban, comb your hair, stand in front of the mirror, and you will see my face and God's face in that. So see God in yourself and in everyone around you.